What's up, pumpers? Jerome here with another TBC video. Today we're going to be talking about the mentality of progression rating in World of Warcraft, and particularly the Burning Crusade expansion, because if you haven't heard, Blizzard released pre-nerf versions of the raids and bosses, which is causing a lot of guilds headaches and even guild disbands. I wanted to get out ahead of this and make sure your guild doesn't disband and you have a lot of fun in TBC. If you do like this type of video, please make sure to hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and that notification bell so that I can keep coming out with more videos like this.
You are not prepared.
Before we get into all the tips I can think of for your guild to improve your progression rating and get through all the tier 2 content in TBC, I wanted to go over the elephant in the room, which is attitude. It feels like with progression rating, people just don't have the patience in TBC that you would expect with progression rating, and I think it started back in Classic with Apes because we saw guilds clearing Molten Core within 4 or 5 days. And so all of a sudden, it wasn't really that acceptable for your guild to be stuck in Molten Core and just farming, the first 2 bosses for a month. So I feel like progression rating nowadays, when we can see guilds like Apes or Progress or all these like high-powered guilds that can clear the content really easily, it makes it extra frustrating when your guild is stuck on Tidewalker, or you're stuck on Alar, or some boss that people consider easy. And what I want you to understand is that even for these very top guilds, it isn't going to be nearly as easy as it looks. They've most likely spent 20, 30, 40, even maybe 100 hours on PTR. Guilds like Insidious, for example, I watch Sal Dally all the time. He talked about all the practice they did on PTR and how their Vash was so perfectly executed and it was basically impossible to fail. If any guild did 100 pulls on Vash on the PTR, they would look like a crisp, clean machine. So that's number one in my opinion. Attitude and understanding that it's not all that meets the eye with these guilds. Piggybacking off of attitude, I think goals are another really, really important part of this. For example, my guild is currently progression rating. In TBC, we're 8 out of 10, and the first week we had expectations of 10 out of 10 clearing. And I've done a lot of research, I did PTR, and I knew it was going to take 2 or 3 more weeks. And everybody just wanted to ignore that. That's just not productive. You have to have ideally very, very lofty goals, because you have to have something to aim for, right? But you also want to have manageable things you can reach and work towards, or you're going to get really disappointed and burned out. And I think a lot of guilds in TBC are super burned out because they can only get 8 out of 10 or even less, and they're just ending up getting really frustrated. Most guilds aren't full clearing right now. You really shouldn't be that frustrated. I mean, we got into Lady Vash for the first time ever in our guild, and on the second attempt, people were upset that we had wiped, right? We were 2 attempts in, and people were sighing and not happy about it. And our expectations were totally out of whack. And a lot of that's on me as part of the management of the guild. It's very, very important to set proper realistic expectations. So for example, maybe the goal should be, cut 30 minutes off your raid time, or, I don't know, wipe 1 less time on trash, or something manageable. Like, there's so many things I think that cause expectations to get out of whack. And the first thing that kills a raid environment is having high expectations and then wiping on the first boss. I mean, I saw this in Classic, I saw it in TBC, I see it all the time. Huge expectations plus failure equals a very, very upset guild. That's how you get guild disband. Now that we've talked about lofty expectations and expectations being a real killer for a guild, I wanted to talk about what you can do to make your guild better. And first of all, it starts with having the most knowledge in the guild. And this is something I've done for some tiers and I've skipped out on for other tiers, and it really makes a difference. So for example, for Phase 2, I have done a lot of research. I've watched all the boss videos, the in-depth ones, and I've made notes, I've made pictures of where everyone should stand, and so it gives me a huge advantage. But then I can look at bosses where I didn't do that, like Vash and KT, and I see this huge lack of knowledge, and it causes us to have more problems than we should. If you're the most knowledgeable person in your raid, it's gonna help you so much with progression. It's not a ton of work, it really isn't. It's reading the wiki, it's doing the fights, and really paying attention, looking at logs afterwards, understanding how everything works, knowing how aggro works, knowing how healing works, knowing each add-on that every class should have. If you don't understand tank threat, if you don't understand DPS, what they should be doing, how to maximize DPS, you look at guilds that are really successful. For example, Laddie with Salad Bakers. He knows every debuff that should be on the boss, and he can in real time pick out which ones are not on the boss and call them out. That's something you could do. He knows exactly what he's missing in terms of his own buffs. He knows, exactly what the healers should be doing and what feels wrong for him. And that is very, very important. If you're the most knowledgeable person in your raid, it's a lot harder to have huge drama and stress and guild disbands, because you're always able to actually point to what's going wrong instead of just blaming that one scapegoat, which is what happened in our progression as well. I mean, it happens in every progression guild. But if you really, really know what's going on, you can have productive discussions about wipes. It's very important you know everything about the tier, or you're going to be in big trouble. Piggybacking off of the knowledge idea, it's very important you give your guild the right knowledge. So basically, you should find the best resources, the best YouTube videos, the best articles, and maybe even make your own. So you need to find easily digestible content. For example, the 30-second guides on YouTube for bosses, and maybe even make your own pictures. That's what my co-officer Selko and I did. We made pictures of exactly where everyone should stand. We put them in a spreadsheet, and I would recommend you do this as well. I'll share basically what the spreadsheet we use now. The reality is not everyone in your guild is going to look at the videos, even if they're really easy to watch. The reality is you may need to make more easily digestible content for them and just get them to look at the basic mechanics. If people don't know what's going on, the harder the raid content gets, the worse it is. I know for a fact when I went through Nax, I didn't know every mechanic. I didn't know everything, and sometimes I would die, sometimes I wouldn't. That's the mark of someone that doesn't have the full preparation. And preparation's everything, because if you know every mechanic, you're not going to make any mistakes to them. Like, I don't ever die on certain mechanics. I just know for a fact I never will. I know how to handle them. I know every aspect of them. And that's what you need your guild to get to. That's the point you need. But it's going to start with people actually paying attention to the guides, and giving people 3-hour raid guides may not be the best solution. So yeah, you're giving your guild resources, but also we need to figure out your roster, right? And this is where your knowledge is going to come in as well, because you need to put together a roster that works and makes sense in the meta, maximizing your damage, maximizing your heals. This is going to be such a hard part of managing a guild, because you might get 25 great players, which we got, but then you have to figure out, how do we optimize, and do you replace good players with other classes that maybe played worse? Such a tough part of being in a guild and helping to run a guild. You have to figure out a comp that works best with the players you have and make small tweaks here and there. One big struggle I always see, the push and pull. Every guild in TBC right now wants to be 5 healing these raids, but the reality is, if your healing core isn't tight and isn't using add-ons and isn't doing really good assignments that make perfect sense for the healers, you're going to wipe a lot more with 5 healers instead of 6. So understanding where your weak points are and how to shore everything up is really important. Smart players are always going to be more valuable than the meta. I know in Classic that's maybe a little arguable, because you could stack warriors. You can it's going to be a lot easier to get someone really dedicated to the game to re-roll in a couple months, because half the people in Classic did it. Not everybody was a warrior day one, and you ended up with, a billion warriors. So while we figured out a roster, it's very, very important as well that these people are dedicated. You have to figure out a time to raid every week, and the more the better. It's really, really one of the obstacles I didn't realize with raiding in these games is basically people don't have infinite time. And if you're a streamer, you have infinite time maybe. If you're a YouTuber, you have infinite time. But the average person doesn't, and you have to make your raids doable for the average person, right? For example, we were only raiding 2 sets of 4-hour blocks a week. And that's just not enough when you're progression raiding. So if you can get people to raid 3 nights a week, 4 nights a week, that's better. There are drawbacks. The more you raid, the less gold your guild will have. There are people that run out of flasks by, the 3rd raid in a week. People don't have infinite gold all the time. So that is a drawback for sure. But the most successful guilds are raiding more, and a lot of them backload it into the PTR when time is easy, when times are good. Peacetime, for example, that's when you do the PTR, and that way you don't end up having to raid 40 hours a week. Ultimately, you need to get 25 people that can sit down, and they're not going to be leaving constantly. Switching in random people all the time is miserable, and it will slow your progression so much. You have to understand, if someone has a life and you set a time and they show up for the whole time, that's all you can ask for. You have to respect that. Ultimately, if you can add an extra raid day, that's ideal, though it will come with drawbacks, because your guild may have less overall consumables. Maybe someone isn't flashed for every pull, for example. These kind of things will add up eventually. So if you have your roster and you have your mentality, how do you make your guild go from maybe okay or mediocre to much better? Well, number one, you have to analyze everybody that's playing the game. And hypothetically, if you had an infinite amount of time and you knew everything about the game, you could look at every single player in your guild every single cast they do, every piece of gear they have, and everything they're doing, and fix it, right? Can't you use, for example, there are really good sheets that allow you to check people's gear and see what's not enchanted. So that's number one. Now you make sure everyone's enchanted. I'll put a sheet there that will allow you to figure out if people are enchanted, if they're geared up and gemmed up properly. That's number one. Like, if your guild doesn't even have people that are fully committed and geared up and enchanted up, that's a really bad sign. Try to figure out someone in your guild that is doing a really great job at their role and assign them to look after everyone else in that type of role. For example, if you have a really good healer, you can make that healer perhaps elevate the other healers, maybe pull them upwards. Maybe he has a bunch of, or she has a bunch of add-ons that are really great. For example, back when I figured out that Superior Wizard Oil for Wrestler Druids was really great, and I told the guild about it, that helped our healers. If you can figure out things, get information, scour the internet, look at the top players, that's really helpful. Figure out what they're doing. You're gonna need class leads. Class leads exist for a reason. If you have a tank lead, they can look at the other tanks and be like, wait, why are you running that? Why do you have that piece of gear? Why do you have that enchant? Like, that's all it really takes, is analyzing what people are doing and what they're wearing. It does take a lot of time. I mean, this is a full-time job if you're doing that, but it really will pay dividends. In the same vein, if you are really struggling to figure out how to make your guild better and you don't really know how to analyze what people are missing, you could bring in an expert. Bring in a friend that plays private servers. Bring in somebody that you know just smashes the content. I did this back in Classic. I had a friend that knew everything about Onyxia. I was struggling in Onyxia Pug. I brought in my friend, and we were able to clear Onyxia. So this also works live. You can actually bring in an Eye in the Sky live. I don't know if you've watched the retail raids, but there's often people like Limit Maximum, for example. He may sometimes be an eye in the sky, basically just sitting there watching everybody, making every perfect call, and watching multiple camera angles, multiple feeds. That would be amazing. You could Discord stream 4 or 5 different perspectives and have somebody literally calling everything, telling you exactly what to do, and I guarantee your guild would elevate in massive ways. Having an eye in the sky maybe sounds a little unnecessary or impractical, but when you're doing progression rating, it is not impractical. It is a great idea, and if you have a friend, a longtime friend that wants to help, or you know somebody has a friend that wants to help, it can be awesome. Beware if you have someone that doesn't know exactly what they're talking about. It could just cause a lot of annoyance. People will kind of tune that person out. But if you really do have a real expert, someone like TSW or Crix or Salve Dally, somebody like, that really knows what they're doing, that would really help your guild. In the same vein as bringing in an expert, you could also look at other expert guilds. You can analyze other guilds' parses and logs and see what they're doing. You can see every spellcast they did. You can see exactly how much DPS they did at any moment in the fight, exactly what debuffs they had on the boss. If you really look at the logs, you're like, wait a minute, okay, what are they doing differently? Maybe it's, they're perfectly debuffing the boss. Maybe they're throwing nets perfectly in a chain. There's all these different little things, logs. You can figure out what the opening spells are from a tank, for example, the opening attacks. You can figure out, when guilds sapper, when guilds use mana pots. You can figure everything out. So there's all these little things that might not be noticeable, but if you look at the logs, you really analyze, you can become an absolute expert, and your guild will really benefit from that. Like I mentioned earlier, it's important as well that the backbones of your guild are taken care of. So the tanking, the DPS, and the healing. So you have to figure out who is performing well and give them extra duties. Make sure these people are teaching everyone else what to do, because it's very unlikely on any server in TPC that you're going to get 25 superstars. So every guild may only have, 2 or 3 superstars, but those people unfortunately need to be elevated. They have to be put in heavy workload position. They may have to analyze their, fellow DPS's gear and figure out what the heck's going on there, or their spell rotations. The rest of your guild probably won't be superstars. There just aren't enough to go around, but you can elevate them from maybe mediocre or bad. I think that's really the mark of a good leader, is delegating and understanding who really is performing well, and then giving those people tasks that can elevate the rest of your guild. So we've talked a little bit about improving your guild, figuring out what the heck is going on, or how to make your pulls better. I really do think one point that is missed often is just how little time you have to get these pulls done, and how important it is that you have a good protocol for when wipes happen. So understanding who is going to be doing what is really important. Who's going to be rezzing, who has wipe protection, figuring out where to die. One of the biggest problems I see in our guild, for example, is people just running away when they're going to wipe. You have to die together so that you can res quickly. I mean, we've only in 2 weeks gotten 13 Lady Vash attempts, and we were getting better and better every pull, but it's just not enough when every pull takes, 25 minutes total or more. You're not going to have enough time to kill these bosses in a single raiding session. So I do think it's really important you hurry things up. You optimize. If people are dawdling, they have to be explained that that's not going to be okay. You have to pull faster. Look at the retail guilds. Everything about these retail guilds is what we want here when we're progression rating. We have to be faster with the pulls. We have to analyze better. We have to bring in outside analysis if it's really dire or we want to get really, a lot better. And we have to understand that it's acceptable to wipe 40 times on a boss. It is. But you have to be able to quickly reset and get going again. If your guild is getting better every pull and you have 25 committed people, that's not a problem. And that's the kind of thing that helps the guild and makes them happy. But when you are just, walking in circles over and over again, that is the kind of thing that really leaves people upset and angry and they want to leave. So I'm going to give you a huge tip after all the mentality and progression improvements that you're going to have. Here's the super secret tip that I'm putting later in the video. This is the one that really is the most important. And this is do the easy bosses every week. And this is kind of obvious at this point for a lot of guilds. But if you're 8 out of 10, you can still get 8 bosses worth of loot every week, no problem. And that is still better than the average guild, in my opinion. That is really, really great. Understanding when to cut your losses and understanding in a tier, if your guild is not that good, going into the tier with the proper expectations and knowing which bosses you can put on farm is huge for morale. If you can get loot every week from 8 bosses, then the fact that you can't kill 2 isn't devastating. If you can only kill like 5 bosses because you keep ramming your head into a wall, that's a big problem. Understanding who is on farm and what is on farm is so important, and that can keep the morale going for months. If you get 9 out of 10, I mean, we didn't kill Nightbane the first week of Karazhan, but we were as happy as can be getting 9 out of 10. And then when we did get a 10 out of 10, a couple weeks later with better gear, it was fine. We weren't stressed out. We weren't, angry about it. Yes, your gear will continue to improve every single week so that those bosses that you can't kill will become easier. Absolutely. That's kind of the design of the game. And the fact that people can't understand that and get very angry when they're wiping is, it's an unfortunate part of the modern day WoW experience. It's just something that people have to understand. If you're getting gear and upgrades, it's going to make those bosses that much easier to kill later. And so you really shouldn't be as stressed and angry as you are about it. Ultimately, I think progression rating can still be a lot of fun for your guild. It is not necessarily going to have to be a headache-inducing nightmare. I do think everyone compares themselves to the top guilds that cleared the content in 5 minutes, and that's really, really unhealthy. I think you can aspire to be these guilds, but you have to make small incremental improvements to your guild that are doable. You want to, make set realistic, but a little bit difficult to reach goals and achieve those goals, and that feels amazing. I think progression rating is a heck of a lot of fun. I can't wait to get back in. I can't wait to get 10 out of 10 in TBC Phase 2. And in Phase 3, we're going to approach it even better. We're going to hit that PTR. We're going to do all the tricks I'm talking about. We're going to make our guild great and fantastic and wonderful and amazing. And honestly, progression rating is the thing that forged it all, made us stronger, made us better players, made us analyze our own faults and flaws and what we could do better. And I think it's awesome. And I think your guild should embrace it too. And you're going to enjoy that process so much more than if you just came in and stomped easy content. It's going to be much more meaningful and you're going to love it. And I just hope you don't disband, and I hope your guild keeps going. And I hope that you make all of your WoW dreams come true. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, do leave a comment below telling me about your progression rating secrets. How do you stay sane when your guild is just an absolute disaster trying to complete the content and you're just not getting anywhere? What are your secrets? How do you keep progressing and getting better every single day? Let me know. Thank you so much for watching, and remember to have a great day.